I desperately wanted to love Disney's Snow White. I had seen so many negative reviews that I felt a lot of the criticism might be more in response to some of the comments made about the film rather than the film itself. However, seeing the film, I was disappointed. I really don't think it was as horrific as the media was making out in terms of story, but in terms of costume, this film really had problems. In this video, I'm going to break down why the dress felt particularly cheap against Rachel Zegler because of her features and the way it just wasn't designed for her, why her bob didn't suit her facial features, why the colours felt wrong against her, and the limitations of the costume design in general and why it just doesn't really work. My name is Ellie-Jean. I help women to curate their image and become unforgettable, and I also love analysing costumes from your favourite shows and films. Let's start with the colours. Why do the colours look so cheap against Rachel? Rachel Zegler is a dark winter. This means that she leans slightly cool-toned, she has very dark, deep features, and she has medium contrast. So as a winter, winters typically have high contrast, but she's on the lower end of that. This means colours such as this are her best colours: deep, dark, rich, jewel tones, which lean almost, I kind of think of them as like a dark jungle of colours. Like this very kind of 2010s jungle aesthetic with all the like green leaves with the reds and the blues. That's very dark winter. She is someone who is really easy to assume is warm toned because she has olive skin. That is a myth that all olives are cool toned, but it's just that olive doesn't particularly decide if you are cool or warm toned, but there are more cool olives than warm olives. It's a bit confusing, but basically just ignore the green in your skin. In the new version of the Snow White dress that Rachel was dressed in, the colours lean a lot more spring in season. You have these rich teal blues, which are very bright, the bright, warm, almost buttercup yellow, but even more artificial and more saturated. The reds also lean very warm, quite tomato-y. I've created this mock-up of what would happen if we shifted the colours more to tones which suit a dark winter. And you can see that instantly the dress feels less cheap. This is for two reasons. First of all, these colours are more natural anyway, whereas the spring colours are more artificial and in this context, take you out of the fairy tale world because they don't feel like they come from nature. They feel false, right? So that's one of the reasons they feel so cheap. But also it's because that effect is exaggerated against Rachel's features, which are dark winter. So she suits these dark, deep, slightly bright, but not very bright colours the best. So against this brightness and warmth, the colours feel even more artificial. This is just a comparison of her against the spring blue and the deep winter blue. The spring blue feels okay until you compare it to the dark winter blue, where she looks so much better. Her lips feel richer, her hair feels deeper, and everything just pops more. Again, let's do this with yellows. The yellow of the bright makes Rachel fade away. You don't really see her features against the yellow, and it makes her skin look more yellow as well. Whereas against the dark winter yellow, now yellow is a really hard colour to wear for dark winters, but I was looking at several dark winter palettes, including my own, and they do contain this kind of muted shade of yellow, which is very interesting. It's not the lightest yellow, but it's like a sort of muted yellow, which is hardly even really yellow at all. That against Rachel's features feels much better. Is it her 100% best colour? Not necessarily, but it's certainly not a really bad colour against her. And again with reds, this is a rich tomato red, and this is a more raspberry, cool-toned, deep red, which is almost pink, and this suits Rachel so much more. By simply placing Rachel in her better colours, her features would have popped more, she would have looked more beautiful, the dress would have felt less artificial, and it's worth saying also, these colours are more true to the original. The original Snow White, you see her in these deeper shades of blue with this more soft yellow in the skirt. So why did we go this artificial route when it's not even like it suits Rachel better? I have a theory about this, that we've seen a lot of criticisms over the past few years that films aren't colourful enough, which is really interesting because we've had kind of the opposite response to this. Things like Wicked, people said the trailer felt too dark, not bright enough. The older adaptation of, which I guess is quite old now, but the adaptation of Alice in Wonderland, you know, the one with Johnny Depp that was produced by Tim Burton, a lot of people said that that was too dark for the world of Alice in Wonderland, which should be bright and fun. So maybe they were thinking, oh, everyone's complaining about colour, let's add loads of colour in. But I think you can do colour in a way which feels beautiful take watercolor shades, have lots of bright colors without being artificial colors. Like there's bright and then there's insanely bright. If you look at nature, it has lots of beautiful bright colors. They're not artificial, they're not quite so saturated. So I think there was a medium there that they just went completely the wrong way on. Another reason the color conversation comes up is, this kind of counter movement against millennial beige, where everyone is complaining how millennials keep giving their children things in grey and beige, which I don't think is a massive thing, but like, it's important for children to be stimulated by colour. And so I think, again, this is a children's film, so maybe they're thinking, let's add lots of colour in, it will capture the attention of children. However, it takes away from the beauty of the film. I think there could have been a much more beautiful colour palette, which is more true to the original film, which still embraced lots of colour in the natural world of colours without being so artificial, and in a way which suits Rachel's appearance better. The second thing I have to talk about is the haircut. The first thing my mum said when we walked out of the cinema was, what did they do to her hair? And it's an important question. I think this is a really tricky thing. The original Snow White's hair is a short bob, kind of slightly on the chin or above the chin. That's a hard hairstyle to do in real life, but it particularly doesn't work for Rachel because I think the best features for this kind of haircut would be someone like a Drew Barrymore, someone with a very round face. If we look at this photo of Drew from the 90s where she's got a soft round curly bob, she feels really cute, and I think someone with those features would have suited this hairstyle a lot better. Sorry, I'm waving my hand all over the place. Rachel has a mix of romantic ingenue and dramatic essences. The ingenue in her features is that soft youthfulness. The slightly wide set eyes is part of that makeup of ingenue. She has slightly round cheeks. The romantic in her features partially comes from the depth in her features. This often creates a romantic look, but especially when paired with soft rounded lips, a round forehead, and lastly, dramatic is also an important role in her features. She has a straighter nose, she has quite sharp brows, and she has high cheekbones and quite a structured face shape generally. Even though it's petite, it's quite strong. Typically, you would hear this conflict and think she has gamine, and I think her essences do almost come across as gamine, but actually, it's not a strong influence in what actually looks best on her. What you're actually seeing is that mix of dramatic and ingenue rather than that kind of boyishness of gamine, in my opinion. For example, you could see her in a t-shirt here and more spiky hair, and as much as she looks kind of hot and kind of cool, it also feels a bit costumey. Again, here in this more gamine look with the spiky hair, I think this, again, feels like a costume. It feels like she's cosplaying someone else, and her features feel quite mature against it. She doesn't look classic against these. She doesn't just look cool. Her jawline and her nose and her cheekbones appear a little bit stronger, and the softness in her features, her softer eyes, the round bits of her cheeks here, the roundedness in her lips, again, is also emphasized, and it just doesn't feel totally harmonious. Whereas in a look like this, where she is in lots of romantic detail with a little bit of drama, lots of intricate details, she really shines and she feels really powerful. And that is a perfect example of a romantic ingenue dramatic mix. So why does this particular hairstyle not feel that great against this essence blend? If we compare it to this look that she did, where she plays tribute to the original Snow White, she feels so much more harmonious. She looks really, really stunning. The extra length complements the length in her facial features, which is that dramatic essence working. The softness in her hair echoes the softness in her lips, her eyes. The volume feels very glamorous. She has quite a glamorous mix. You can think of the romantic ingenue dramatic essences a little bit like Kibbe's theatrical romantic, if that helps. So that glamour feels amazing against her. The trouble with the Snow White bob is it's completely flat on her head. It has a small curve in the bottom. It's quite gamine-ish. Someone like Audrey Tautou might suit this. That was my initial gut reaction, but now I've said that out loud, I kind of want to say it best suits like a romantic, like a romantic ingenue gamine maybe, where they have really petite features, really rounded facial features like Drew Barrymore. I also think there is an element of this particular hairstyle wouldn't suit anybody. I don't think they executed it very well at all. So I think just a little bit more movement would be more complimentary on Rachel and anyone else who wore it. Whereas it's kind of flat to the head and then it comes out and it just feels like a triangle, and it just doesn't feel elegant, it doesn't feel girlish, it doesn't feel feminine. I think for Rachel, if they added a little extra length to the bob so it actually hit her chin rather than being like between her cheeks and her chin, which is a bad length for her because of that dramatic essence, which gives her a little extra length. If that had been a little bit longer, it had more movement, more curl to it, I think it would have looked really good. I also feel like the look feels unpolished without the red hair bow all the way through. They do have it and then they get rid of it, and I think it would have felt more polished with it. I also have loads of other thoughts. Those, I think, are the two main issues in terms of Rachel's features. Someone in my comments also put that the sleeves are really overwhelming for her, as is the skirt. I do agree with this. It looks like the dress is wearing Rachel, and that is because Rachel is a narrow short medium, probably. My gut is to say narrow short medium, but she is quite rounded. Like, if I were to put her in Kibby, I would put her as a theatrical romantic, so I should definitely consider round. I think because she has quite a low weight as well, it can be quite hard to see roundedness, and she's quite a good example of this. I probably won't be able to use this photo because I don't know where it came from, but I'm currently looking at a photo. I'll try and put, if I can find that Rachel Zegler is the source of this photo, I will put it here. If not, I'll have to find a different one. But she does have a rounded shape to her chest, even though she has quite a low weight, and a rounded shape to her hips. She hasn't got a lot of angularity to those points. I also considered medium for width for Rachel because it does look like her shoulders are smaller than her hips, but I think this is where you should really consider. I think she's quite a good example of how when you're at low weight, sometimes your shoulders can appear bigger than your hips, no matter what your actual width. And it's quite hard to do a line drawing on her because obviously I don't have a perfectly posed photo. So my gut would still be to say narrow short, medium, or narrow short round. I think narrow short round. Looking at these photos, scrolling through the various bikini pics of her and so on. She has very rounded hips, quite a small waist, round chest, and in some photos it looks like she could be more medium, but one way I assess medium is not just like, is the shoulders bigger than the hips? It's, can you actually see them as wide? Do they have any width at all? Because typically someone with medium width, they have like a touch of width, right? So think about someone like Kate Winslet, who is medium round. I could almost see her using Kibby terms as a soft natural, whereas I couldn't see that for Rachel at all. Again, someone like Emilia Clarke, I could see her as a soft classic as well as being a romantic. So there's something medium within her, whereas Rachel, I couldn't really see that. That's just one of the ways that I like go through the process of typing somebody. So we can then assume that the big sleeves, the wide skirt, feels like it's wearing Rachel because of the narrowness in her frame. I think one of the major problems with the Snow White adaptation is that it is a direct copy rather than an interpretation. In the Cinderella 2015 film, that dress is obviously stunning, but not just her main Cinderella dress when she enters into the ball, but all the clothes leading up to it feel authentic. They feel like real clothes people might actually wear, and they're also context relevant. Snow White's dress feels like a costume, and I've seen lots of people saying that that could be because they're trying to sell this costume to children. And that makes perfect sense from a business perspective. However, I think Disney's main problem that they've made with this film is maybe focusing on the business element rather than making a good film. Cinderella was extremely successful because it was a good film. The costumes were beautifully designed and really thoughtful. You had multiple costumes going throughout the film, whereas this just has this pretty much one costume. There is one costume that comes before. I actually quite like little Snow White's dress. Her main Snow White dress just feels cheap. It feels like something you could actually buy from the Disney store. And that's the idea, but it doesn't look good in film. I think they could have made a way more beautiful, intricate dress which felt like something from the past. Again, like Cinderella 2015 feels like it was something from the 1800s. Like it's like a fairy tale world based on English 1900s. This, I couldn't even really place it. Where is it supposed to be medieval? Is it supposed to be like 1800s? Is it supposed to be... It just didn't have any grounding period in time, and that takes away from the magic slightly. Similarly, Maleficent is clearly inspired by the original Sleeping Beauty, but through this really imaginative lens. They don't just recreate Aurora's dress for Elle Fanning. She's in all these beautiful colours in a way which complements Elle Fanning as well. And you can also read my breakdown of Elle Fanning's features below. But the dresses aren't direct copies. It doesn't feel cheap. It doesn't feel obvious. It feels inspired, and that's what you want in a live action. You don't want it to just be a direct copy. You want it to be inspired and almost be a new film where you can see the little nods of nostalgia towards the original without just trying to be the original. I think a major problem Disney had is that they didn't know the point of creating this Snow White beyond the the fact that they're doing live actions now. Mirror Mirror, I think, has already done what they tried to do with this film. In Mirror Mirror, Snow White learns to be brave, to fight for herself, to stand up for herself, to be kind, gracious to others, to embrace love. That film is funny, it's witty, and it's also beautiful. The costumes in Mirror Mirror are stunning. I love her kind of, I want to say like warrior outfit, but that's not quite right. Like when she's a fighter, when she's one of the bandits, she's in this beautiful blue teal blouse with a little corset, and it looks practical and it also feels magical. She also wears beautiful, soft, stunning dresses at the palace covered in florals, which feel very authentic to Snow White's story. The dress Snow White wears before her main dress in the new adaptation feels just really generic. It feels like a generic fairy tale dress. I don't see much to do with what it has to do with Snow White. There aren't any cute little nods to Snow White. It feels really boring. Mirror Mirror also tells that story of Snow White being reimagined as someone who fights for herself. We kind of have that story, we have that film that we can watch, so Snow White doesn't bring much to it. And I'm going to come on to a counterpoint to that in a moment, but I'm also going to say Once Upon a Time also does that. Snow White becomes a fighter. She becomes a kind of bandit. She has these amazing fighter costumes, and she also has these beautiful costumes. She becomes a mother. So I think these stories have already been told. I also think, which is my counterpoint, people are judging this film more on Rachel Zegler's comment than the film itself. I actually don't think the film particularly makes Snow White into someone who fights for herself. She's really not this stereotypical 2010 strong female character. I think she does have a lot of kindness, and she does rule with friendship and empathy and softness, and she does it for herself, and that's great. However, I think that the film didn't quite commit to her being a fighter for herself. It didn't quite commit to Snow White's strength as softness, and actually I felt like Snow White's character was a bit generic. I couldn't really define what made her different from, say, Lily James's Cinderella. She just feels like your generic Disney princess. I didn't feel like I knew that much about Snow White, about what she wants, because the original Snow White, what she wants is to not be lonely. She feels lonely. Her father is gone. She wants someone to love. She's wishing for the one she loves, and that is a major arc in her story, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think you can wish for a friend, wish for people in your world, a partner, without it being like there's something wrong with that, and they erase that entire desire of Snow White's, and they don't really replace it with much else. She wants to save her kingdom, I guess. She wants the people to be free, and that's great. She wants to stand up to the evil queen, but so would anyone in that situation, I feel like I don't learn her weaknesses, I don't learn her vulnerabilities, and I think that's a huge part of a character. What is she actually overcoming? Is it supposed to be that she's a coward in the beginning and then she finds her courage? Because again, I feel like that's already been done with Cinderella. The 2015 version of Cinderella, she lets the stepmother treat her in all these awful ways, and then she finds her courage and she stands up for herself in this way of kindness. It would be nice to have Snow White have a slightly different story. I'm running on now, but I think essentially there was no vacuum for Disney's Snow White to fill, because we already have a strong Snow White in Mirror Mirror and Once Upon a Time. I think they should have focused on making this beautiful, how they did for Cinderella. This should have been a really beautiful, stunning version of Snow White, and they just didn't bother with it particularly. It could have been like a watercolor painting. Bird-like singing. I also didn't particularly love the singing in this film. I did see this criticism that the songs are really powerful and like from the chest, they're like real typical musical songs, when it should have had that bird-like singing of the original, and I really agree with that. I think there were also problems costume-wise with the entire film. The Queen's costumes felt plastic. They felt, again, like something you would buy from the Disney store. They didn't look like real jewels. They felt really cheap. It felt like you're seeing, what's the phrase? You're seeing the seams of the production, and it takes you out of it because you're so aware of the fact that this world isn't real. And I think a focus, an emphasis on getting the costumes right, making them beautiful, making them feel more fairy tale than modern, I think would have made a major impact on the film, because that's all I would be talking about right now. I hope you enjoyed this video. I know this is a bit of a downer. I don't really like doing criticisms, but I think it helps to understand why Rachel looked this way in this particular film, and hopefully someone from Disney sees this, and if you do dare to make a version of Tangled, which is my favourite Disney film, you really make it beautiful and you really emphasize that and you focus on that and you stop making these Disney store costumes. I hope you enjoyed this video. I have a further breakdown of this film on Substack, which you should totally go and check out. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time.